Housing Committee of Council. Present are members Wynn Weiser, Councilman Christopher Cooney, our alternate Councilman Brian King, Councilwoman Sherry Sachs, our law director Brad Bryan, the mayor, and housing director, housing and community development director Markel Davis. I'm going to start by making a motion because this room is very hot. And I know there are a couple residents here that would like to talk about the short-term rental ordinance. And they've come tonight, and I think I'd like to start with them if we could. That way they don't, hopefully they won't melt. Because this meeting will go an hour and then we also have council. So I'd move to take agenda item 2 and move it up to agenda item 1. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. If you'd like, well, let me give some background. We did pass an ordinance back in actually June of 2024. It has not been enforced for various reasons. One of the things we asked Mr. Bryan to do at the last meeting was to take a look at a change that the city of Cleveland was proposing in theirs. And also there is a ordinance in Mayfield Heights that was just passed, which eliminates having short-term rentals at all. Oh yeah, they banned them completely. So how about if we have Mr. Bryan give us that report, and then what we'll do, and then we can hear from Mr. and Mrs. Christensen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I did look at the Cleveland ordinance. It is still pending and is not passed yet. But it looks like it's getting closer. And it is very similar to our ordinance that was passed last year. It is in the business regulation section of the code, not the zoning code. The one main difference in the Cleveland ordinance from ours is they have a 15% density requirement that for each block, there can't be more than 15% short-term rentals. And if it's a apartment or condominium building, same thing, there's a 15% threshold, but everything else in their ordinance is very similar to ours. Some communities have passed bans to short-term rentals. I know some of them that are not being enforced, and they do have short-term rentals, even though they have the ordinance, but they've stayed under the radar, and other communities around the country have been sued for putting in complete bans on short-term rentals. There's litigation going on in Colorado and Texas. New Orleans short-term rental law got overturned a few years ago because they treated out-of-state property owners differently from in-state property owners. There was a case that overturned a short-term rental ban in Southern Ohio. It was appealed, and then that appeal was dismissed and settled, and I think the ordinance was repealed. But there are many communities in Northeast Ohio that do have bans on short-term rentals. Property owners have argued that, it's a violation of their property rights, not allowing to use the property for short-term rentals. They're comparing them to long-term rentals and why you wouldn't be allowed to do it. So there's issues with the complete ban. The case law hasn't really fleshed itself out yet. I think there's litigation in Michigan as well on this issue. Pending in the Ohio legislature is Senate Bill 104, which has had 4 hearings, I believe, in the local government committee. It's heard testimony pro and con. And that would, if that passed, I'm not sure if it's they're gonna try to ram it through with the budget bill that's due, to be passed before the end of the month, or they're gonna let it stay separate and continue to consider it for the rest of the year, and that would ban communities from banning short-term rentals. So that would be out the window under the present composition of the bill. I think the only impact it would have on our short-term rental ordinance would be it sets a limit of a $50 application fee per year for short-term rental owners. Ours is currently $250, and renewals are free if it's renewed for subsequent years. So we would have to amend our ordinance to comply if it passed in its certain form, its present form, and also the enforcement provisions might have to get changed a little. Because right now, the way it reads, municipalities could suspend short-term rentals for up to 30 days if they violate the same local rental regulation requirement restriction 3 or more times in 180 days. I believe, if we have one violation and it's not corrected right away, we can suspend them for up to a year. So everything
a year?
I
I'm
think,
sorry,
I
we're
think that's
100.
I think that's our existing
Okay,
remedy right now,
Okay.
is one of the remedies in there. So if the state passes that legislation, we might have to do some adjustments, but mostly the present form of that state bill would leave our ordinance intact.
okay. And ours is, in your opinion, our ordinance was legal, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Christensen, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Okay. I believe we have a microphone up there. If that's not going to work, you can use one of the microphones. All our mics are live.
Hello.
Great. Okay. We'd love to hear from you.
Good evening, and thank you for taking the time for hearing me today. My name is Matthew Christensen, along with my wife, Christina. We are 10-year University Heights residents. We live next door to an Airbnb property. We have 3 children. Our son has a severe form of epilepsy and is maxed out on medication. If he's startled awake at night, he has seizures. These seizures could kill him, essentially. This is why we value the peace and quiet of University Heights. That was until this weekend. The listing next door prohibits parties and caps guests at 6 people. Yet over the course of the weekend, we were forced to call the police 3 separate times. On Friday night, a party started, loud music began blaring at 12:30 at night. If we had full-time neighbors, they would be made aware of our son's health concerns as his room faces that property. We had no choice but to call the police and report the noise violation to keep him safe. But it didn't stop there. Saturday night brought an even bigger crowd, and I'm not being hyperbolic when I say this, at least 80 people came through that property. Cars parked up and around the surrounding blocks. And amid that chaos of calling the owner of the property to settle this situation, which they did, they came, but the guests were not leaving. They did not call the police. They sat out there and were screamed at by these residents. So these relatives, who are the owner's relatives, never called the police because of the damage a 911 call to the property would do to their Airbnb listing. As the last few people were leaving, they yelled at my daughter, who was looking out the window, blaming her for the disruption. I went out to ask what the issue was, and they responded by trying to start a physical altercation with my daughter and my wife. This is all in front of our children. And at that moment, we realized this can happen to any family in this city. This is not a one-time nuisance. This is a pattern. This also happened in South Euclid, if you guys know, ending with 2 people shot. This is not just my problem, our problem. This is the city's problem. These short-term rentals owned by out-of-state investors are essentially unlicensed hotels plopped in the heart of our residential neighborhoods. These owners don't live here. They don't shop at our local stores, pay our local taxes, or send their children to our schools. Their only interest is profit. And when the trouble arises, if there is trouble, it's up to the neighbors to be responsible for the fallout that happens. It's up to us to call the cops or to break up whatever situation. And that's incomprehensible to even think of. Out-of-state investors are trying to buy up every home that our families used to grow up in, the starter homes, the 3-bedroom houses with fenced yards, the ones where you plant roots, and they're turning them into unlicensed hotels, essentially. They're revolving doors, weekend escape paths for people who have no ties to the place and no concern for who they hurt while they're there. If it looks like a hotel, runs like a hotel, profits like a hotel, it should be treated like a hotel. But more than that, I want to ask this council to fight for the children of this neighborhood, to stand with families, to say that the children of University Heights matter more than the revenue of strangers. Because our kids shouldn't be collateral damage in someone else's business model. Let me be blunt. University Heights residents pay the 10th highest property taxes in the state of Ohio. And if I'm wrong, correct me. We pay those taxes gladly because we believe it's worth to live in a city that offers safety, strong schools, and a peaceful quality of life. But when out-of-state investors turn family homes into revolving doors with no oversight, no accountability, and no regard for the people who actually live next door, it feels like a slap in the face. The cost of this isn't just emotional, it's educational. School districts are funded per pupil, and if I'm wrong, please correct me. So when family-sized homes are taken off the market and sold to short-term rental investors, our schools lose students, and with them, critical funding. The public school district is already underfunded. However, this won't just impact the public, but also the religious-based private academies as well. There's no place where families to live, no one will attend the school. Our city is so unique with this blend of religious institutions and incredible public schools. We should keep it like that. What does the future look like if this continues? We became homeowners in 2019. Our neighbors on both sides have both moved since 2019, and on both sides are owned by LLCs. We used to know our neighbors. Now I have, luckily, the one on the right, it's a rental. They're nice, they're cool, but who knows? And then next door, I have a hotel. I have 3 children in this house. It keeps me awake at night. I don't know who's next door. I don't know who's gonna be there at any given time. So I'm asking tonight, I know there's legislation, but just for some real change, it is logical to ask for a cap for rentals in our city. University Heights is only so big. If you go on the Airbnb website tonight, just do it for fun. There's at least 8 to 10 in University Heights. The city is not that big enough to sustain 10. The house that my wife and I, we came here and we rented when we came here. It's 4056 Meadowbrook, right next door to the Nuns. I don't know if you're familiar with Jesu. That now is an Airbnb. And we got married at that house. Now it's an Airbnb. It would have been a perfect house for someone to buy, for a family to live in. So at least have a requirement for only residents that live in University Heights to own short-term rentals, because they are invested in the community and help control the issues if they do arise. And any home operating as a commercial enterprise in a residential zone should have to go through full rezoning. Again, if it walks and talks like a hotel, it needs to be treated like a hotel. So please don't wait until there are more police calls. Please don't wait until there's an incident like it was in South Euclid, where 2 people were shot. Don't wait for that to happen. Don't wait for more families to leave. The residents and the families deserve peace. We deserve safety, and the community deserves to be a community like it already is, not a weekend destination. And with that, thank you for your time.
Thank you. I want to ask Mr. Bryan. I know we have other codes that might actually affect this. how many complaints can we have for a house before we can do something nuisance wise?
Well, I mean, right away, if there's a loud noise complaint, the police department can come out and cite them right away and make them be quiet. Under the short-term rental ordinance now, parties are prohibited from taking place at short-term rental properties. There's quiet hours from 10 PM to 7 AM, so no loud noise whatsoever during those time periods, and occupancy is limited to 2 people per bedroom plus 3 additional occupants. That's the limit of the people that can be on the property, but if it's a loud noise complaint, we can deal with it that way. If it's rental, I think there's a limit, I think, of 3 violations. We could go after the rental certificate, but
They don't have a certificate. So hang on a second. Is this 3754 Silsby? 35, could you? Would you, in the, pardon me, in the, thing, so we have it accurate,
3746.
3742,
6.
46, 3746. Okay. Silsby. Okay. Mr. Cooney?
Thank you. As you were speaking, I was looking up the ordinance. It is 648-17, subsection B. The chief of police or his or her designee, upon finding 2 or more nuisance activities declared in the section within a 12-month period, shall cause a written notice to be served to the owner of the property, the tenants, and the building commissioner, declaring that such property is a nuisance property. So it's 2 or more.
Okay, that's good.
So, which is good. There's also, and I was trying to find the other, if the police routinely show up at the property, they can assess the property owner the costs of those visits as motivation to get things under control. So my question, Ms. Davis, is this property, has it applied for a commercial permit?
Or commercial.
Rental. permit.
Rental permit?
You mean
rental
rental,
permit?
Mr. Cooney, rental.
Rental permit.
Off the top of my head, I do not know. This is
Okay.
the first
So
time
that would
hearing
have
of
to
the
be,
address.
that would have to be verified.
From what we were told from
But-
the officers, they said it was not. The police officers, I can't confirm that, but from the police officers that arrived on the scene, they told me
Yeah.
it was not.
I-
But are we asking about a long-term rental or the short-term rental?
It's a rental.
Well, the only
Well, it's two
permit they
different
can
codes,
apply
though.
for right now is
Well,
long-term,
yeah.
Mr. Cooney.
So when we had this discussion back in 2022, at that time, the law director, because there is a federal lawsuit in New York with Airbnb, the city could not prohibit short-term rentals. And it sounds like there's been other municipalities and states that have been trying to enforce the ban on the rentals. So I'm curious in regards to density as opposed to outright ban. So,
Be fantastic. And again,
Right.
University Heights is only so big.
right.
And at this, it's too many.
Right, so, and I hear your frustration, and I'd be upset too. But at that time, when the ordinance was put into place during discussion, it was since we could not ban it at the end of the day, the city should be collecting revenue from that property,
At the very least.
okay? So A, it has to get registered, B, there's an inspection, and C, we should be collecting revenue from that property. If there's repeated violations, the University Heights Police Department would have a record of those. And based on our current ordinance, they could make the city declare it a nuisance if they so choose. And then there's a path for them to go down. So it's not as if we have nothing on the books right now. And I understand,
Disagree.
yeah, so I understand what Ms. Weiser's, and I appreciate that she's really pushing this. But I think there's probably a conversation, obviously, with Mr. Bryan, UHPD, and Ms. Davis Building and Housing as to the correct path to go down. To basically, we have to eliminate it. And it's not just your, next to you, it's throughout the city. So. Right. Guess that's my comment.
Okay. I agree that we do have nuisance regulations. One of the challenges for that is having to call the police. And in case you didn't notice, one of the pushbacks that people get sometimes, especially the neighbors when they call the police, is lip and issues from the people who are renting that. In this day and age, a lot of residents hesitate to call the police because of that. We have those ordinances there. Yes, we could apply them, but we also have to get the calls in order for it to happen. That's one. Number two, the house is being used as a rental. We currently require rental permits for all 1 and 2 family houses that are rented on a per year basis. Because these are short-term rentals, we have owners who are bypassing that. And again, doing rentals that don't fit the character of the neighborhood lead to issues such as the Christensens have brought to us tonight and have definitely made sure that we now know, because I know in various conversations, sometimes people go, oh, well, there's no complaints about these houses. Or they minimize how many of them actually exist. One of the reasons why this committee, after a lot of discussion on that ordinance, recommended to council its passage in June of 2024 was to begin to address these problems. And as Mr. Bryan just pointed out, because it limits the number of people who can be in the house, and it also limits the time when the noise can happen, it allows the people who live around those houses to not have to worry that they're going to get what they got stuck with. And that's the other issue. We had nothing in our ordinances that could deal with that, Councilman Cooney. Now we do, it's there. All we have to do is enforce it.
So there's 648-17.
I know 648-17 says you can declare a nuisance. Does it say, does it limit the number of people who can be in that house?
It only states the number of calls.
Thank you.
So.
Does it
So,
limit the
they-
time the
they do
noise can
state-
happen?
There sounds there at least 2, possibly 3 calls were made even on one night.
Well, that's
UHPD
2 and
can do
1.
investigate. So.
Well, yes, that house needs to be investigated, but it does not address the core problem. That doesn't address the core problem, and you know that.
There is a path, at least for this particular situation.
For this moment in time, for them, if there were to, if the police department reports it as a nuisance, and if the city takes it to court as a nuisance. We got 3 ifs going.
So why don't we ask them to do that?
I think we should. That takes care of that, but that does not take care of the rest. Anybody else on the committee? Mr. King? Comments?
To add on to that, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut off anyone. While I'm thankful to know that that ordinance is there, and that's something that it's good to know, to have that. Ultimately, it's up to the neighbors to do that. And again, I have 3 children. When you're talking about 80 plus teenagers, I'm not as gung ho as I used to be before I had children. If I didn't have children, it would have been a different situation. But once you have kids, you want to basically protect them and hide. So even calling the police, these people didn't know that we called the police. They just assumed, even though we did, they just assumed. And I don't know what type of target that's gonna put on my back, on my family's back. And credit to the police department, they always come quick. Officers were fantastic. No problems with that at all. I know you want to add.
To add to that, we actually had a situation after the family left, after the party died down. Someone pulled into the address again at about 10:30, and they just sat there. And it scared us so bad that we put our kids in the back room because we were like, are we about to get shot up? What is happening? Because their big complaint was we stopped their party and they had invested all of this money into this party. So they sat there for a long time. So when it started getting sketchy, we called the cops again, and the cops did come out, but by the time they came out, they had left. And I mean, we were scared to call again because we tucked our cars away. We were like, what type of target did we put on our back? Because these people were not only fighting us, they were fighting the aunt and uncle that came out to help diffuse the situation. Like screaming obscenities at them the whole time. And the owner was on the phone with the auntie and uncle telling them not to call the police because it looks bad on her Airbnb register. So how often are these overlooked because they don't want the negative feedback on their Airbnb listing? So do you guys actually have a number of how many rental properties are in University Heights? Because from us, we moved here in 2015. We moved here in 2015. We were in a rental home on Meadowbrook. It was not listed as a rental property with the city of University Heights. We found out after the owner died of a heart attack that we were not appropriately listed and we were asked to leave the premises. So at that point, we had to really quickly find a house to buy here in University Heights because we had already started in the school district. So, and now having a rental on both sides of us, knowing that the one to our right is also not listed because we've spoken to the resident in that home and he doesn't believe that it is like appropriately registered with the city.
Okay,
So that, you can remedy that by calling the housing department and say, I don't think this property, and they'll tell you if it is or isn't. And
that
if
would
it's
go to
not,
you, Ms.
they'll
Davis.
follow up and
Let me introduce, this is Markel Davis. She is the Director of Housing and Community Development. We have run across a number of 1 and 2 family homes that have not registered. We don't know they're not registered. The city doesn't until something happens and usually it's the neighbors who pick up the phone and call a council person and complain. And then poor Markel has to deal with us going, is this house registered? And she takes it from there. There are issues with out-of-state owners that are frustrating for every city in Ohio because our legislature does not give us really good powers to do stuff with them. We are fortunate on the plus side that Ms. Davis works with the mayor, who works with the city prosecutor to actually bring court cases against those people. And I know that starting under the previous director and now again under Ms. Davis, that there are, I think you have 4 court cases going through on various properties right now. So the administration is trying to do something on problem properties, and I would never want anyone to think they are not. Mrs. Sachs, did you have any comments you want? But you're on council if you care to. Mr. King, anything?
Yeah, I'm just wondering at this point, what does the administration need in order to start enforcing the Airbnb ordinances that we have in place? Is there something that council could do to?
Yeah, we could get our coordinator position salary approved that's been pending since October 7th of last year. I've advised that getting this program off the ground requires staffing up the department and getting them fully trained. The department has not been fully staffed in some time. And I would point out that certain aspects of the ordinance, even if the registration portion is not actively happening because we don't have the staff for it. Other aspects of the ordinance limiting the number of people who may be in a rental would seem to apply regardless. That's not only for ones that are registered, that's just for a short-term rental, period. And also, disturbing the peace, having excessive noise, that's going to be true no matter who owns the property or who the people are at the property. So certainly I would encourage, and I realize the reticence some folks may have about getting the police involved, but calling the police is the appropriate remedy in these situations, regardless of whether a property is registered or not registered. It's regardless of whether it's an Airbnb, a short-term rental, a long-term rental, or an owner-occupied property. Somebody has an owner-occupied property, but they have 80 people over and they're making crazy noise. They will be treated no differently by the police. They're not going to get a pass just because they own the house. If they're disturbing the peace, if they're disturbing their neighbor's peaceful enjoyment of their own property, that's taken just as seriously. So, I would encourage you to call the police in these situations. And I'm really sorry about what you and your family have gone through here. This is, this is something where if this were a registered Airbnb, if the department was staffed up and they were registered, what would have happened still would have been unacceptable. It wouldn't have changed what needed to be done over the weekend to bring peace and order back to the address 3746 Silsby. This particular property was a long-term rental at one point. I remember 8 years ago, there was an incident on the street at that house. Shortly before I became mayor, there was a shooting.
That was our house, actually.
Oh, it was your
Before
house?
we-
Your house.
That
Oh,
before we
oh,
purchased
I'm
it, we were
sorry.
told the history of.
I'm sorry. I thought it was this house. Okay,
No,
but it was,
actually what we were told.
Yeah.
From what we were.
well, I think
But to add to the resort,
Mhm.
now you
Sure.
don't have to worry about that because there's a family owning
that's great.
that house.
Great.
And that's the
Mhm.
point. It's not, granted, what you're saying is correct.
And there are about 1,000 registered rentals in the city, and there are houses that are, we are aware generally that not every rental is registered, but there's really no way for us to know that unless,
Right.
unless something comes up to draw attention to it.
And just to add to that,
Mhm.
the point is have University Heights lead the charge of saying, hey,
Mhm.
how, by square footage, that's for you to determine. I'm not smart enough to know exactly how many. I know University Heights is small. How many are really needed in the city? Truly needed. Now, again, if these were neighbors and they had a party, I would have been over there. I would have been there. I would have known about, they would have known about, son. That's the point, is more, even if it was a rental, a regular rental, I would have known these people. So that's the overarching thing, is that most of the people in this community know their neighbors, at least the people
Mhm.
to the left and right of them.
Yeah.
If you're talking about a revolving door of people, you don't know who's coming in. You don't know if, and again, the house that we rented, which we found out after the fact was an illegal house. Now that illegal house is an Airbnb. Is it legal now? I don't know, but it's 4056 Meadowbrook. And they're next door to the nuns convent. Like they don't need an Airbnb sitting next to them, a party house. Like I think it may not be a party house, but you don't know. You don't know that until it happens. And then
Well,
the situation.
I have a few comments I'd like to make.
Okay.
Okay. Because I did a little bit of homework, as I always do, which sometimes you hate. This particular
you doing the work?
short-term rental ordinance was discussed before I even came on council in building and housing. So it's been discussed for an extended period of time. It was finally passed on June 17th, 2024. The ordinance was not vetoed by the mayor. And I'm going to assume it was actually signed by the mayor. And since it was passed under emergency, it should have gone into effect without delay. The law director had assured us that what we had was legal and under Ohio law and could be enforced. The only issue that Jeff Engelbrecht, who was the then Housing and Community Development Director at the time, had with the language was a concern about a short-term rental that went over 30 days because that moves it under contract and under long-term. The legislation dealing with the Housing and Community Development Coordinator is not about the position, but rather the salary range for that position. That was not introduced to council until October 2024, well after the short-term rental ordinance should have been implemented and used for the benefit of our residents. Instead, over that 4-month period, nothing was directly done. I would also note that we asked Director Engelbrecht about department staffing early in 2024 and did follow up with him. And he stated to the committee that the department was fully staffed and could cover all work that was required, even though the position for a housing and community development coordinator was vacant at that time. When Mr. Engelbrecht left the city's employ, Ms. Davis, who is our new Housing and Community Development Director, now has been placed in a difficult position. And think we need to recognize that because we keep asking about the ordinance, but that lack of enforcement is not due to her not wanting to comply with it. And I need to state and underscore that. It is due to her direct supervisor telling her not to implement it. And actually, on your Mayor, on your campaign Facebook website, you actually posted the text instructions that you sent to her. So that is a manner that is accessible via any public records request. Of course, that did come along with an attack on council, myself specifically, because we had not moved the community development coordinator position along. In your post, you claimed there really wasn't any reason to really focus on that because there were only 7 short-term rentals you could find on Airbnb. And obviously, as you have, Mr. Christensen, actually validated that by saying there were 8 to 10 that you found. However, nobody checked Craigslist. There are rentals listed on Zillow. Yeah, all over the place. The short-term rentals do not just exist on Airbnb, where there might be some controls and where complaints from a police department and from a city can lead to them no longer being listed on Airbnb. The claim about the lack of staff would have fit when both our administrative 1 and 2 positions were open. And we have not pushed this until those 2 positions were filled. And Ms. Davis worked hard to actually include, and she told us she's been exceedingly diligent as the director. And she included in those positions when those people were hired, some of the items that had been under the old job description for that community development coordinator. We have, as a committee, discussed that. We requested from the administration an updated job description. We did receive one. We had a meeting. The committee was pleased with that job description. It doesn't really cover this. It covers a lot of other items that the mayor can make an excellent case for us to need to have it happen. However, then we have to say, okay, now we have the job description. does the salary range meet it? And that council approves those salary ranges, and we do approve the job descriptions as well. What that does, please hold on just a second, Mayor. What that does, it may be unusual in the city of University Heights. But one of the things that has come out with the county scandal and with a number of other scandals are ghost employees, where people are hired, get paid, and do little, if any, work. And having the job description, so everybody knows what that person is doing. You know that the dollar value that the city places on that position is appropriate. And the residents know you're getting your money's worth. I will end by saying what I keep saying. We have to put our residents and the community first. We all in our neighborhoods can tell you the problems that we have. We discover other problems in other neighborhoods because you who sit there and have to live with those problems day after day after day. We just had one that we're finally moving to get cleaned up, where a neighbor was cutting the grass on a semi-flipped house that had basically been abandoned for over a year in order to keep his property values up. And it took until the vice mayor and I went out to the house, and then we reached out to Miss Davis and we got things moving because people don't know where to go. But if we don't have the ordinances that allow us to move for these type of houses that are owned by other people, we're not going to get anywhere. We can have a petty in-between fight here. I want this position. I want that dollar amount. I want you to approve it now. But holding up something that hurts residents is maybe not the best way to handle it. Miss Davis actually at one point worked, she has to deal with Citizen Serve, which is the program that is used where we log our permits, where we log our inspections, so our inspectors know where to go to follow up for the initial inspection. And that takes, you've got to be able to tell them what kind of fields you need. It isn't just here, I need this, as she explained to us, and she went to work on that. So we have movement on those things. So we will at some point get there, I do hope, but I'm really glad that you became frustrated enough to speak out, because I think it's important for every person on council, just like Mr. Cooney. Hang on, I'll wait until you're done texting.
I'm not texting, I'm looking up the number of properties on VRBO.
On what?
The number of University Heights properties on VRBO.
Oh, good.
I'm listening to you.
Okay.
I'm multitasking.
Okay. That those things we have to be aware of, that what we do has impact down on the street level. I don't think we've resolved everything, but I think the mayor is clear that he will at least attempt to make sure that the police follow up, I would hope. And we can use what at least you're willing to enforce to get moving on it. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry that you're being dragged into the middle of an ongoing dispute between council and the mayor, council and the administration over this particular ordinance. There was so much that was said here. I don't think I'm going to be able to catalog and correct everything for the record, but it's been corrected numerous times and will be corrected again. The Airbnb ordinance passed. It was never brought to the finance department with respect to the issues of taxation and tax collection. And there were things that needed to be checked on with the county with regard to those issues, because the county charges a bed tax. And there was a question about whether we had an enforceable ordinance, which there was no implementing the ordinance during that review period. That was something that our previous finance director, Dennis Kennedy, was working on with a law director for some time. We didn't get an answer on that till after Mr. Engelbrecht had already left the employ of the city. Whatever Mr. Engelbrecht would have said about staffing of the department then is irrelevant when it comes to where the department was as of the time that we would have been able to begin, find out that we had legal clearance to go ahead and enforce this ordinance. We were attempting to restructure the department. And thus the coordinator position became a relevant item with regard to that restructuring. The council committee, this committee, did not hear anything on that ordinance until January. It was referred to them at the October 7th meeting. At their October meeting, they didn't cover it. They didn't hold a meeting in November. In December, they didn't get to it. January, I think, is the first date they finally devoted 18 minutes of time to it. The chair is incorrect when she says that council approves job descriptions. It is not within the role of the city council to approve job descriptions. Significant amount of time was spent with our HR manager and the committee going over a job description, which was not their job to micromanage. Job descriptions are solely within the province of the administration. When they reached a point when they felt satisfied that they had micromanaged that process enough, instead of actually passing the salary band on this, they referred it to yet another committee, which has not yet met on that. It was supposed to meet tomorrow. Due to exigent circumstances, that committee is not meeting tomorrow. There's not going to be a quorum available. So that remains held up. We had, it's very simple. People do the work of the city. And if we don't have the people here, the work doesn't get done. I mean, unfortunately, this particular ordinance has become, the poster child of what happens when the city council refuses to work with the administration. And here we're simply trying to do the work of the administration, the legacy programs that are on the books. The housing department is in charge of the point of sale program, of the exterior maintenance program, of the rental registration program. And this additional program, when we don't have a fully staffed department, was something that, we will address when we have a fully staffed and fully trained department. I've made that clear, in part out of frustration that the council simply has failed to act in getting this passed. In fact, it wasn't the January meeting was taken up, it was a February meeting, because after the January meeting of this committee, which preceded a council meeting, I went to the next council meeting and I asked the city council if they would simply re-refer the matter to the committee of the whole so that this could be addressed timely. And the city council declined to do that. Unfortunately, you've been dragged now into the middle of an argument, which you shouldn't have to be in. And I would submit that even if this ordinance were, even if the registration portion of this ordinance were implemented, and if what happened to you over the weekend shouldn't have happened, and it wouldn't have not happened just because there's an ordinance on the books. I don't think anybody can say that if 80 people come over and have a party, that an ordinance that council passed last year that they ignored, they still ignored it. And I think, you're being led to believe that but for the fact that the registration portion of this ordinance hasn't been implemented, this wouldn't have happened to you. I think that's not true. If these folks are doing what they're doing, and they shouldn't have done it, I don't think the status of whether or not the Airbnb landlord happened to file paperwork and pay for a permit would have made any difference here. But the fact is, and I've got the floor here now. The fact here is that if you've got a disturbance next door There are laws on the books. This law is on the books. And there are other laws on the books with regard to unreasonable noise and so on that nevertheless apply. And if the police department was called, if they were called, and again, was unaware of this incident until I got here today and heard from you. So I do not know what the CAT entries say. I have not heard from our police chief or the officer in charge that evening. So I do not know any of those things. I'm happy to follow up with them and also follow up with you about this. So if you let me know how to get a hold of you, I'm happy to have somebody contact you.
Can I add just something to that?
Sure.
Everything you said, I hear it, understand it. I'm okay with that. I think ultimately though, that's a Band-Aid, and I don't know the
Yeah.
ordinance coming into this. I'm trying to educate myself. When we looked it up, it's not enough to just look it up. I'd rather talk to you guys face to face. So now knowing the things, and thank you for all of the information that you've given us tonight. In the future, if it does happen, of course, we're going to call the police immediately. I think from a resident standpoint, if there is not an ordinance of a cap in the city, there should be. I think ultimately, the things you're saying is
There is.
logical. Everything you said is logical. However, it's the cap
Mhm.
with the space. There shouldn't be so many per. And that might not have changed the situation we were in. It could still happen. I'm not ignorant to think that it would not have happened, even if there are 4 Airbnbs in the city of University Heights. It could still happen, but
I'm gonna take the
I think
floor.
it's wise for a small suburb such as ours to at least entertain that there should be a cap, that it won't get out of
I'm
hand.
going.
And
to
you
take
should
the
know
floor
that
back.
Bay Village has a 29-day ordinance where you can't rent a property in Bay Village for 29 days or
Okay.
fewer, just because of these sorts of situations. They had parties like that. I
Thank
would
you,
think
Mayor.
that
I'm
this is in
taking
the public
floor
interest.
back.
All right,
I am taking the floor
all
back.
right, well,
One, I didn't ask you to come to put you in the middle of this. And I
That's okay.
want you to hear that. But we have been told that this is a minor problem. This is not a big deal. What the mayor just said, that ordinance is in effect, is it not, Mr. Bryan?
Which,
The short term.
yes,
Okay. If that house had, if that owner had come, they would have known that there was a restriction on number of people and the time. That doesn't mean they wouldn't have violated it. And as a matter of fact, they have. So actually, here's the other part of it. What did the police charge them with? Just the noise ordinance? Or are they also charged for not having a permit? Since the ordinance is actually in effect, Mayor, they can be charged for not having a permit. They can be charged for having over the number of people that are allowed to be in a short-term rental. They can be charged for a party after 10 PM. But the police have to know that they can charge based on that section of the code. So that's part of the issue as well. Because what are the penalties? There are penalties associated with this ordinance. And as the mayor often says, those housing penalties are important because they help us enforce the good order of the city where we live, where we exist. Be that as it may, one thing I will always say on a management basis, if you ask me to approve money for a position, the position should be structured such so the pay does work for it. So part of that is those are valid things that councils and mayors will forever fight about. That's part of the political process and the democratic process of where we live. But it has to always come back to one thing. Are we in our debates, our back and forths, our I'm not happy with you, so I'm going to get you and I'm going to get you. Who are we hurting the most? We're not hurting you, Phil. We hurt residents like you. And that's something that each one of us has got to remember. That I think is much more critical than anything else. And Mayor, if you do talk to the police, would you remind them, I assume we have a whole code now, a whole section of the code, that they can actually charge based on all of those items when they get calls to short-term rentals that are not registered? That way, at least we can get some enforcement done. And then we can deal with if they do show up asking for a permit, permitting them. And yes, I talked to Mr. Kennedy about that tax issue, and I've also talked to Mr. Bryan as well. And I believe that did finally get resolved, at least to a point of that is an issue that we might have to revise the ordinance for that, but that is only one small piece of that ordinance. And you know as well as I do, legislation's never perfect the first time we roll it out. We have to roll it out. We have to begin to implement it. We have to begin to get the pushback and then do the corrections. Yes, Mr.
Yeah,
Bryan.
just emphasize calling the police is the best thing you can do at the time when that's going on, because they're the ones that can come out. The housing department's not working on weekend nights, so they have the authority to get people to leave that aren't supposed to be there, to shut the party down, to cite them for noise complaints. And the most important thing is they'll write a report and document the situation so that exactly what happened, what they did is of record so that it can be used, going forward. So.
And
Thanks for-
please reach out to Ms. Davis for if you know of rentals that are long-term rentals that aren't registered or any of these other issues. She's a great help. And she and the housing department, our inspectors, will do what they can. From the committee, any final comments? Ms. Davis.
I know you spoke about the tax portion being a small piece of it, but it's actually, I think, a bigger piece, only because I'm collecting money from the person that's turning in that application.
Then I would
Right.
suggest talk to Mr. Bryan. And Mr. Bryan, if we need to come up with a revision for the ordinance, we'll have to get it through.
Yeah, the way it works is, I mean, there's the application fee when they file the application. And then there's quarterly tax returns that have to be filed. And I believe those are supposed to be filed with the finance department.
I thought there was a portion that spoke about a percentage.
Yeah, you're supposed to pay 3%.
But that goes through finance, right?
Yes, but right, quarterly, they have to account for what they made on the rentals that quarter, and it's due, I think, 30 days after the end of the quarter, each quarter, where they pay and see how much they collect.
Hey, we are at 6:58. You got 1 minute, Mayor, if you want it.
Sure. I see a gentleman in the back who'd like to be recognized. I've had a few
You got
opportunities to speak.
1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Terry Shapiro, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. This will be quick. Aside from, or besides all the sniping, the questions of finance approving for positions and naming what the position should be doing and everything like that, I think the bottom line is you passed an ordinance to prevent these short-term rentals. All right. I thank Mr. Bryan here for his little history about how certain states are having issues in court and things like that, and different communities are having issues in court. Why not go ahead and just go ahead and implement it and then see where the chips fall? That's how you protect the community. go ahead and implement no short-term rentals. And then if somebody wants to sue, let them sue. But in the meantime, you've blocked them, you've stopped them, and that is protecting the residents.
Yeah, and just to emphasize, those court cases talk about total bans and limiting the number that can be in the community. So our ordinance doesn't do any of those things.
I
So
mean,
we're not
no,
implicated by those.
what, in the ordinance, I mean, I like what was said about the place or the ordinance, no less than 30 days on a rental. Because then you cut out the back and forth in a house every 2 or 3 days. I mean, I've got a house on the corner of my street that is, while it's not a rental, houses people on a weekly basis that are here for Cleveland Clinic and things like that. It's not a rental, but you also have people that may rent a room for the Sabbath. I happen to be Jewish, for the Sabbath and everything. So, you know, there is definitely a division between somebody that's just coming to party, and Airbnb is basically, for the most part, you run into these problems, and somebody who may be having somebody come to stay for 2 days, but the homeowner's in the home. And I just don't see why, if things are passed, they're not implemented. Again, the police are there, call them. They are the ones that have to enforce it. Because that's what the police are the enforcers. And maybe there needs to be a directive to the chief of police that, these issues need to be taken more serious to keep a calmer community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are over. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned.